On the Joy of Football podcast this week with Martin Tyler and me, Neil Barnett, we are looking at the most entertaining teams of our lives. We want to know what you think. You know what the email address is now. I don't. I keep getting it wrong. It is the Joys of Football podcast at gmail.com. What's the most you've ever been entertained?
Aguero!
The Joy of Football. Hello, and welcome to the third episode of The Joy of Football with Martin Tyler, the voice of the Premier League for over 3 decades with Sky, but still commentating all over the place. We'll hear more about that in a moment, where he's been this week. And me, Neil Barnett, over 30 years working inside Chelsea in their media, and also 14 years in the USA with Sirius XM Radio. And we're going to start with your emails, which have come in after the first 2 episodes. Thank you very much. Keep sending them. In fact, we're very interested in what some of your views are on some of the subjects we're bringing up today. Remember, the email address is the joys of football at gmail.com. Is that right?
Joys of email. I've done what you've done then.
Right.
Email. The Joys of Football podcast at gmail.com. There we go.
The Joys of Football podcast at gmail.com. I will never get it right, and neither will our Manchester United supporting producers. Okay, let's go straight into a couple of your emails. They've come from the States, which is great. I love that. From Martin Young. Great job. Love the podcast. I've missed you both on Sirius. Martin used to come on with me a lot.
I did, for a very nominal no fee.
Being that I am of a certain age, I'm enjoying your strolls down memory lane and your opinions on the state of the game today. I'm going to come on to that in a second. But Michael McCormick has also emailed. First, let me congratulate you both on your awesome first podcast. Great show, Neil. You're missed on Sirius XM. Thank you. It's not the same without you. Thank you. Now the main point. I have a personal interesting story that you both may find humorous and unique. Although I'm American, I grew up in London as a child of expats in the 60s and 70s and was a rabid Chelsea supporter. Good health issue, that. When I was 13, I entered a competition in The Sun to rank the best goal scorers of all time and write a sentence explaining who I selected first. All I remember is picking Jimmy Greaves. Several months passed when out of the blue I got a letter saying that I had won the competition and was invited to a private champagne lunch for myself and 3 friends with a footballer of my choice. I chose Chris Garland. That will put a date on it. Early 1970s, who was a one-season wonder at Chelsea at the time, kicking myself since for not selecting any of a dozen other players. The Sun sent me £100 for travel costs, which my friends and I pocketed as we took the tube to the Waldorf Hotel in Aldwych. I still remember the shock on their faces as 4 young teenagers walked in to the private banquet room to a full bar and a 3-course lunch with Chris Garland and various reporters for The Sun. Up until then, they had no idea of our ages. It's one of the great memories of my early years in London. Do you remember Chris Garland?
I do. He was a commentator who likes blonde hair. You always try and look at teams from a professional point of view about how recognisable they are, and you couldn't really mistake Chris for anybody else of that generation. Good player, and a bit more than a one-season wonder.
Yeah, he was. It didn't quite work out for him at Chelsea, but he had a goodish career. He had a very, very good League Cup final in 1972 at Wembley when Chelsea lost to Stoke.
And sadly, we lost him last year.
Yeah, we did. He had Parkinson's disease, but when he'd been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which was a good 20 years before he died I sat with him at a big lunch in the West End somewhere, hundreds and hundreds of people. One of those lunches where you get absolutely hammered and listen to some second-rate, or
you do,
quite possibly top-rate comedians. And there were about 3 or 4 of us, and he was showing us before the lunch really started his shaking hand. And he was challenging us over the course of the lunch not to shake more than he did by the end of the lunch. And all I can say is he outdrank all of us, and his hand shook less than all of ours at the end of the lunch. He was an extraordinary physical specimen, and it was he put us under the table. Chris Garland, rest in peace, mate. Fantastic. State of the game. The first email mentioned the state of the game, and the state of the game was such that in our three of the best segment at the end, you chose as your young player Phil Foden and spoke about his 2 hat-tricks that you commented on. And
can I break the story? We were sitting here on the afternoon, and where in the evening he went and got his 3rd hat-trick, and we had a bit of a discussion about, we shall do that again, or change the statistics, or even do a little cheat with the edit with our skillful Manchester United supporting production team. But we went with it because it's given a chance to say yet again. And since, of course, that hat-trick against Villa, the wonderful goal in the Bernabeu Stadium, no less, to show yet again. I hope it shows we made a good pick on that particular afternoon.
Yeah, what a player. I've been to some games this season. We're going to focus today on just the most entertaining football that you can watch. And I've been to some games this season. The 4-4 draw between Chelsea and Manchester City is one of the best 90 minutes of football I've watched in terms of sheer entertainment. But of course, since then, I had that Chelsea 4, Manchester United 3 game where Chelsea scored twice in stoppage time to win it. And after the match, I actually spoke to Mark Cucurella, the little Spanish left back of Chelsea, and I just asked him this.
Mark Cucurella, if I look back on Chelsea's season, I think of the 4-4 draw here with Manchester City, the 4-3 win here against Manchester United, and I think you will agree that English football is bloody mad. Is it different from Spanish football? Are you getting your head around English football yet?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's different. Here we lose the control in 1 minute. Everything is possible. I think it's part of this amazing football. I think right now is the best football in the world, and it's amazing to play there. And we play 4 nights like today, and we need to enjoy, and tomorrow focus for the next game.
I mean, have you come across such crazy tempo, perhaps such disregard for possession as these games against top sides from a top side?
Yeah, for sure. These games is always open. Everything can happen. But today we have this bit of luck. Like sometimes we don't have, and we win the 3 points, and we are very happy. We need to continue in this way. And this game and these 3 points give a lot of confidence.
Mark Cucurella there, that coming to you in association with Sirius XM FC in the USA and America. And just before we move on, you this week attended a championship game out of choice.
Of course, out of choice. I love the pyramid. We talked about that in the last podcast, and I look up to the championship. Remember, I coach in the National League South, so those are players that we envy and admire. And I went to see Southampton play Coventry because I've got the FA Cup semi-final for the World Feed between Coventry and Manchester United. So it was a scouting mission. Southampton made me very welcome. And every time, of course, it's not the same ground, but I did my very first television commentary at the Old Dell in Southampton. It will be 50 years ago come this December, so I'm hoping that I'm still commentating then. And I did drop it in to Southampton about whichever division you're in. I hope I can come down and do a game around that anniversary, which would mean a lot to me, not too much to anybody else. But a soft spot for Southampton. And I saw one of the strangest penalties ever, really. Haji Wright, who you know from your US connections, and I had seen on the television scoring the wonderful winner at Wolves to get them into this semi-final. Absolutely, he took about an amazing finish at Stamford Bridge. That one at Molineux was up of the same ilk, really. But there were 2 things about it. One was that the referee spotted it all up. Slightly contentious penalty, but no VAR, so penalty it was, the referee given it. And Haji Wright waited for the whistle, and then the whistle was blown, and he still didn't move. he stood like a statue. So much so that the referee started after, it seemed a long time, it probably was 8 or 9 seconds maybe, but it was a long time for that kind of situation. And the referee's now starting to come towards the penalty taker to say, hey, get on with it. At which point he thinks, I better take the penalty. And he slips and I think kicks the ball with his right foot against his left foot. It hits the crossbar, so it doesn't go in, so it's not a question about it. But the game was restarted by a vigilant referee because he's played the ball twice. So he's infringed. So it was not just play on. It was a free kick. And without VAR, I thought it was a very good piece of refereeing, but it was a bit of a freak. And to be fair to poor Haji Wright, who is obviously a decent player, played for the USA, played in the World Cup, I think featured against England. And it ruined his night. It was only about 10 minutes into the game. And then they went 2-0 down, and he never really got into the game. So, but it was a good experience. And in my letter from the Gantry, I will be referring to it in another context.
Right, more of that later. We've got a new segment today, and it is, are you ready? Ta-da! Best time of our lives. What we're going to do, we're talking about entertainment. So what we're going to do is say, I've taken 9 clubs. What have been the most entertaining eras of this club's history? Not the most successful, but the most entertaining. And Martin is going to give us a game that he's commentated on, which has been the most entertaining of that club. So we're going to start with Manchester United, the biggest club. And the reason I'm starting with United is the absolute opposite of the most entertaining period, because a forgotten fact, it seems to me, is that in the late 1970s, when Dave Sexton was their manager, and they hadn't won the league for 10 years, they managed to come runners-up in the old First Division. And Sexton got sacked at the end of the season because the football wasn't entertaining enough.
Yeah, it was a foretaste of what's happened since, really. The managers now have to find both aspects. They have to win games and do it in an entertaining way. I think at the time, and I can remember doing a Manchester United game where it was a goalless draw and it was a good result, really. It was in the sense that I don't think we'd had 3 points for a win till the early 1980s. So it was a point and just dropped 1 point. But it was pretty dour. And yeah, it wasn't such a big surprise. But when you look back on it now, it doesn't resonate really with what you're talking about, the best time of your lives in terms of entertainment from one particular club. It was, I suppose, the start of, they'd had Tommy Docherty, then they had Ron Atkinson after that, who both were entertaining people and wanted to play entertaining football.
Yeah. So for United, I'm going to go... there have been so many United eras. Obviously, the 60s, Best, Lord, Charlton, Paddy Crone, who I think is an over-forgotten player, one of the great midfield registrars, he'd be called.
Not by Manchester United, I suppose I would guess, because MUTV have used him for a long time. Less so now, and he's a good age, Paddy.
84 now.
Yeah, but very articulate. And I worked with him at ITV. He was part of the ITV World Cup panel for several World Cups, and was a really entertaining person.
Yeah.
And we loved him to bits, and he didn't mince his words. That's why he was such good television.
They had a great team in the 70s under Docherty with Gordon Hill and Steve Coppell and was it Stuart Pearson up front? That was a really good side. Ron Atkinson in the 80s. But the Fergie sides, the first Fergie successful side with Kanchelskis and Sharp and Hughes and McClare, and then you move on to obviously Beckham, Keane, Scholes, Giggs, with whatever variety of attackers you had, York and Cole or Solskjaer and Sheringham or Van Nistelrooy and Rooney, and by now you had Ronaldo or I thought Tevez and Rooney was a really good partnership, and it kind of tailed off after that, but you still had Van Persie, all these Vans. Anyway, so I've got to choose one of them. And sorry, young people, but Best, Law, Charlton, Cucurella, and it has to be, because George Best changed the face of English football. He made it. George Best was the first player, I think, in my lifetime to be bigger than the game. Everyone knew who George Best was. In the UK, I'm not suggesting.
I did a commentary with George, which was quite late in his life. Alec Ferguson's testimonial game, live on Sky, and just to sit there, and pick his brains really through a match that had some meaning, obviously, but not. It wasn't a competitive game, and it was just one of those pinch me moments that I was alongside. I did do a shoot with him for ITV in my early years at a health farm, when he was recovering from one of his bouts of absence and cleaning his body out, really. And he was lovely. He welcomed us in, and he at his best, he was a really warm personality. Anybody who's had the privilege of spending time with him would agree with that.
Man.
Extremely articulate, extremely intelligent. So intelligent with this shoot that he said the last bit was the cold plunge. And he said to me, I'm doing this once, you better get the camera right because it's not going to happen again. So we were on tenterhooks and he plunged with the typical panache and showbiz style, and we got the shot and we got the piece, and very happy memories of George. A wonderful player, but a really interesting person as well.
Your favourite United commentary?
Well, yeah, there's so many to choose from, but the one that I get asked about a lot, actually, and it's a long time ago, like you going back in time, was they were 2-0 down in the Cup Winners' Cup, I think, from away game to Barcelona in the Nou Camp. And they came back at home and won 3-0. And Maradona was the Barcelona player at that time. It was an extraordinary turnaround that people had written them off. High-scoring games are more prevalent now than they were then. But it was a magnificent performance. And Brian Robson, who's been in the news this week, hasn't he, Brian, coming out and giving interviews saying he was the man who was going to persuade Jude Bellingham to join Manchester United, and he holds up his hand and said they failed abysmally. Eric Cantona, I think, was involved. He's someone you haven't mentioned in your tribute to players, a wonderful part of the Manchester United story. But that's the one for me, and it was a truly magnificent night for the club. It wasn't live on television. We're going to come on to that a little bit later in terms of how television's evolved, but it was a big highlight show on the midweek evening, and a terrific performance, and really put some very famous Galacticos of Barcelona of the time in their place.
Liverpool. Now, I'm old enough, and you're old enough to remember Liverpool getting promoted into the top flight at the beginning of the 1960s. And the team that Shankly put together then that won the league, and I think it was their first ever FA Cup in 1965.
Ian St. John, diving header.
Yeah, and Roger Hunt and Peter Thompson, the left winger. Ian Callaghan, who became such an important central midfielder, was the outside right, was the right winger. And that was some team. And then you go into the 70s with Steam a Highway on the left wing, and it was still a very Scouse team, wasn't it? Full of Liverpool accents, but of course Kevin Keegan was up front by now, and I thought that was a terrific side that went on to win the first European
Telepathy
Cup.
with John Toshak.
Yeah.
We did one of those fake quiz programs, asking them questions, whether they'd anticipate each other's answers as well as they anticipated the flick-ons from Tosh for Kevin to score so many goals.
But then the 80s, obviously, where they became so dominant. And for my Liverpool team, I mean, I think the Klopp Liverpool team has been right up there for entertainment with Salah, and when it was Mane and Firmino, and even this season, I think by having McAllister and Szoboszlai in midfield, it's been incredibly entertaining again, and a lot of youngsters. But I'm going to go with the end of the 1980s with what they called the Dream Team. When Kenny Dalglish was actually manager, and they signed Beardsley and played him up front with either Aldridge, or I think it was during that season that Ian Rush possibly returned from Italy, and they had John Barnes on the left wing, and
John Barnes, I think, was the best player in the country that season.
Yeah, and they beat Nottingham Forest 5-0 in a famous game, and that was Liverpool at its most entertaining for me.
Well, I get asked, what's the best game you've ever commentated on? And I have a stock answer, but I mean it. And I've watched the game again since, and through the pandemic, actually. Sky did it as a sort of retro Monday Night Football, which was the 4-3. There were two 4-3s, one in 96 and one in 97. Mine is the first one. I didn't work on the second one, which was the Colin Moore closing in finale to win it for Liverpool. Robbie Fowler scored very early on against Newcastle. Robbie Fowler scored early on. He scored 2. Stan scored 2. And if memory serves me right, it was Ginola, Ferdinand and Asprilla got the goals for Newcastle.
Asprilla.
Yeah, well, there's a lovely story at the end that just showed that it resonated. First and foremost, they were both going for the title. Neither won it, so they almost sort of punched each other out. But it was an extraordinary game. And fast forward from 1996 to 2014, opening game of the World Cup, and I'm there as a commentator going up to the Gantry, a rare privilege in a new stadium in the Sao Paulo, a lift. Normally we're climbing stairs. It's a good test of whether you can still commentate. If you can climb up to your club at Chelsea, you have to go up the stairs. And
Tottenham.
Yeah.
Normally you can't get in the lift at Tottenham. You've got to go up 5 stories.
It's worth waiting for the lift. Anyway, this lift opened, and I'm in it with Stan Collymore, who's working for the radio, Talk Sport probably. And so we're chatting on the way up, and the lift doors open, and we are face to face with Tino Asprilla, who's there for Colombian television. And he's coming into the lift as we're getting out of it at the high level. And he looks at Collymore and he goes, "You cost me my Premier League winners' medal." Now, I don't know how much English he'd spoken in the interim, but those words came out pretty forcefully and with a smile, of course, as well. And there was hugs and embraces. And I did point out that actually he didn't get a Premier League winners' medal, Stan, either. Manchester United came between them and finished top of the pile. So, but a truly great game, and for me that will always be. At the time, I think the Anfield commentary position was the best in the world. It changed with the development of the stand. It's not bad now, but it's not quite as good. Then it was right in the heart of the special Anfield atmosphere, and that was a really remarkable night. I remember that we had to be cleared out of the ground because we didn't want to go home. We all. Basically, most of the crew, Andy Gray was working with me. He lives in the Midlands, so he had a distance to go. We were going back to London. We didn't want to go. We just wanted to savour the atmosphere, and I still get little goosebumps talking about it. It was a really wonderful night. I think it's 10 minutes of highlights on YouTube. It's worth a watch if you've never seen it before.
Manchester City, and obviously the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, Colin Bell, Francis Lee, Mike Summerby, Neil Young, footballer, not musician. I always say that I'm convinced that Kevin De Bruyne is Colin Bell's love child because they're built the same.
Is a joke, by the
way. They run in the same way, and they're both midfielders. They're same colour hair, and they play so much in the same way. It is extraordinary how Manchester City midfield life has come a full circle.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin De Bruyne is still a class apart from most midfield players in the world.
I think Colin Bell.
Colin could get a chance with England, really. Of course, he was part of the 1970 World Cup squad where England were trying to retain the World Cup, and they arguably had a better side, better squad, and Colin was part of that. Anyone who hadn't been in '66 and was involved in 70 was sort of tainted by the fact that we got knocked out in the quarterfinals. But he was an amazing player, an absolute a giant on the field, a true athlete, when being an athlete meant ploughing through mud and not like the smooth surfaces of today. So, but I can only pick one game for Manchester City.
Well, before you do, I've just got to say that the current Manchester City are the most entertaining. The whole Pep era Manchester City are the most entertaining, with the best players, the best football, the best goalkeeper passer of all time, and it's just a new level. And again, it's a difference between watching on television and watching at the game. If you go to the game and you see the whole pitch, you see the patterns of play all the time, and I saw somewhere Gary Neville say that he could get bored watching Manchester City. No way. No way. They are the most entertaining team in person, not on television where you can't see the whole pitch. They're the most entertaining team I've ever seen.
Well, I go back to 2012 and May the 13th and 94 minutes and how many seconds was printed on the back of the shirts for a while. A game that Manchester City were expected to win, but City fans and anyone listening to this podcast of City persuasion will know what I'm talking about. They had its expression, typical City, which meant we build up and then we let down, and I sort of had that feeling going through the match that I might be saying that at the end because QPR they were playing QPR, obviously they had to win had to win against a team that was struggling for its Premier League survival, managed by a former Manchester City manager and former Manchester United player Mark Hughes. So the context, the conclusion, which is all anybody now sees, and it's I'd be stupid to say that I'm not proud to be associated with it because it is. They play it without the commentary occasionally, but usually with the commentary. But without the commentary, it's fantastic. The match director, Tony Mills, did the most amazing job. I've had a lot of reflected glory from the way that game finished in the television broadcast, but Tony Mills hasn't, and he should, because the shots are incredible. The shot of Joe Hart running around, absolutely knowing nothing. Brain had gone completely. Has this really happened? Completely in a state of sensational feelings, but not quite. Is it really? Have we really won the league like this? So those sort of shots make it for me, and but it shouldn't have got to that. Funny enough, a Manchester City fan a few years ago said, I didn't like your commentary on the game, and of course as a commentator you learn to live with that. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. And I said, what's the problem? He said, you shouted too loud when Jamie Mackie scored for QPR. And I went, well, they're trying. There's an issue. I'm not just doing it for the storyline for Manchester City. I mean, for QPR to be 2-1 up in that game. And, of course, the backdrop of the simultaneous telecast, as they say, with the United game. And United had their hands on the trophy, so to speak. The game was finished. And that's where Tony Mills did a wonderful job, that split screen, where I go, it's all over at the Stadium of Light. Manchester United have done all they can. And City need whatever the words flowed after that. And Tony made it happen because everybody was taken to that the two prongs of the day, and it was wonderful television, and it's the vision that's wonderful. I'm lucky that I didn't mess it up, but the truth is the vision was absolutely spectacular. And Tony Mills still around, still doing directing, and he should be getting far more credit for that day than he does get. I keep telling him, I hope other people do as well.
Okay, we'll come back to more clubs in just a moment. We're going to move on now and go to Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
And my passionate complaint today is in keeping with this theme of football needs to be entertaining. People have forgotten, and of course the referees are to blame and IFAB are to blame, VAR is to blame. People have forgotten what the offside law is about. The offside law is not about threads. The offside law is not about the stewarding of whether somebody has got a foot ahead of or behind the last or the second last defender. The offside law is about trying to stop the forward gaining an unfair advantage. What was the unfair advantage that it was brought in to try and stop? It was simply that in order to make the game more entertaining, you didn't want to put up some 6'4" centre forward like Martin Tyler in the penalty area, standing there, and then hump the ball up to him as soon as you
That's what my
want it.
career was all about, by the way. But I did stay on side.
Because it would destroy the game. It needs to be more sophisticated and more subtle than that. So they wanted you to work the ball forward in order to make the game the entertainment that it is today. But in order to keep the positivity of it, they said if they're in the area of doubt, you give the forward the advantage because it is about scoring goals. So what have IFAB and the referees done? They've given the defender the advantage by saying if any portion of the forward's body is offside, it's offside. That is, if I can use the age-old English phrase, a load of bollocks. It is ruining the game because if any portion of the forward's body is onside, it should be onside. And then you don't need threads because it's not about the stewarding of it, it's about the spirit of it. So you need simply an eye. Is any portion of the player's body, the forward's body, offside, it's onside, then it's onside. So if he's got a boot onside, it's onside. You need daylight between the forward and the second last defender, including the goalkeeper, in order for it to be offside. And you need that daylight by the look of an eye, not by the drawing of a thread. And then the defence of the officials is, in the spirit of the game, that was onside. In the spirit of the game, that was offside. And you can't argue with it. You shut up, you pundits. You shut up and you carry on. And the game is not interrupted anymore. But it's got to come from IFAB, not from the stewards, the referees. It's got to come from IFAB. Any portion of the forward's body onside, it's onside. There needs to be daylight for it to be offside. And it needs to be seen by the eye, not by a thread.
Well, wherever you draw
voice of reason,
wherever you draw your line, there's going to be that kind of complaint. Oh, that should have been. I think if it's a matter of fact, football is showing that it's a matter of fact. The one doubt we all have is how accurate all these readings are, but they're accepted by IFAB and by the game generally. But of course, you have to be at a certain level to have VAR involved anyway. So I personally, I thought the suggestion of having, if your foot was the point of contact with, if you like, the offside position, if your foot is onside, which is the main weapon to score a goal, and that means you're just looking at one part of the body, that should, if your feet are onside, if your head's too far forward or your shoulders too far forward, your arms bringing it, they should get away with wipe that out, and it should just be the foot. And I think that would simplify it. But I do like the fact that we know from VAR that there aren't many disputes about it, to be honest. But I'm still tickling over the inventing of the law of handball in the Arsenal game, where the referee allowed Gabriel to make a schoolboy error and pick the ball up when the ball was in play, handball in his own penalty area, and the referee felt very sympathetic towards this schoolboy error and didn't give the penalty that the law demanded that it should be given. And I just wonder, with the Arsenal penalty shout right at the end, whether that was in his mind that I've done Arsenal a favour by not penalising Gabriel, and maybe I shouldn't give them another favour by giving them a penalty that many people thought was. I personally didn't think it was, but I know a lot of people did. So it's not answering your question about the offside law, really. But
spirit of the game, a referee the spirit of the game.
I think we in this podcast we've got to be careful. I work with the referees. As a commentator, you're making decisions at the same time as referees. You're making your calls. I think there is scope for human error, and the human error is eliminated to some extent by the way the law is interpreted and the technology that goes with it. So I was at Southampton watching a championship game. If the flag went up, it was the assistant's call and nobody could do anything about it. And maybe VAR has complicated the issue so much that we're having a rant about it, or you're having a rant about it. But for me, the law that is, I think...
The law needs changing.
I think the law of handball needs changing back to what it was. I mean, we've had 4 or 5 changes.
That'll be the next one.
But I have to say that one one law that worked for years and years and years. Did he handle it deliberately, yes or no? Surely that's enough for a decision to be made.
No, it's not. And we'll come on to that on another podcast. There you are. That's Voice of Passion, Voice of Reason. Next up, on the same theme, Martin Tyler's letter from the Gantry.
Right. Here we go. Having worked as a commentator on the Premier League since its inception, I believe television should be proud of its part in creating the huge popularity of English football around the globe. Well, you would say that. I can hear you cry. What about the subscription costs? What about the switching of fixtures? Little heed seems to be paid to the difficulty that causes to fans both home and away. On the cost issue, I asked those of you old enough to remember how much live league football was previously available free to air before the advent of sports channels. Very little is the answer. There was an experiment, and I did watch it in 1960. It lasted that one game. Then in the 80s came what was labelled Snatch of the Day. ITV did secure the rights for a select number of live games from the old First Division. It was a big step at the time and went some way towards eliminating the fear within the game that fans would stay at home and not venture out from in front of their screens, so that the attendances at grounds would therefore dwindle. The opposite happened, in fact. The live broadcasts promoted football. But back then, the cost of the rights bought by the television companies was very low by today's standards. Free-to-air television could cover that with traditional advertising. The Premier League changed this. The breakaway over 30 years ago, now led by entrepreneurs like Alan Sugar, who recognised its financial potential. And now the rights are bringing billions into the game. And you may have noted when the bidding process comes around, there was one not that long ago, there are very few contenders and none which would show Premier League games for free. As an aside, what many of us would like to see is a football-only subscription, obviously lower than the full package. But that, I'm told, would decrease the take-up for other Sky channels or TNT channels and threaten the total business, a business that has expanded considerably on the solid rock of retaining the rights to the most watchable football in the world. On the switching of fixtures issue, the controlling factor at weekends is the 3 o'clock Saturday rule from UEFA. No live football can be shown at that time. This does protect the fantastic pyramid in England. It might be abolished. There is certainly a lobby for that, but I personally wouldn't support it. But there is a lot of football in midweek. EFL and non-league fixtures go up against television of the Champions League, for example. Yet recently, as we've said earlier in the podcast, I went to see Southampton on a night that both Arsenal and Manchester City played in Europe in very attractive games that were shown live. There were still 28,000 at St Mary's. I suggest that clubs can do more to help supporters get home from the difficult kickoff times. In my youth, even Woking, my team, liaised with the rail authorities and special trains were put on, like to Putney Bridge for the Amateur Cup semi-final at Fulham in 1958. It went to a replay. At Brentford, again there was a special, crossing the normal main lines. You couldn't get a direct train to those stations from Woking. Newcastle have had some difficult dates in London, and we hear a lot about them, and understandably so. But why not hire a special train? I have some good experiences with the current management at LNER, the line that goes from London to Newcastle and back. The big no-no, of course, is remember the hooligan era when trains were regularly wrecked and passenger safety threatened? It was horrible. I hope these are different times. Fans at least deserve another chance. Arsenal, under Arsene Wenger, hired special trains for the players and the staff. I don't think the supporters were involved. The Manchester clubs block book carriages to travel to London games. Scheduled services, but they have their privacy within. Their service is quick and, for the most part, very efficient. I think public transport should be given the chance to solve some of the difficulties for the most important element in the game, the supporters. And recently a fixture was changed for that reason. Although somewhat perversely, Spurs v Nottingham Forest moved from Monday night to Sunday evening for a rail issue. This time, though, an impending strike on the original date. But it worked. There is nothing like being at a game, cheering on your own team. I think we'd all agree on that. but the television experience now comes very close. For example, the broadcasters, we commentators, have better access to VAR decisions. We hear the Stockley Park half of the conversation, not what the referee himself is saying, but that half of the conversation should be available in the ground, as in other sports, and why not the whole conversation? The match analysis on TV is presented in a language you don't need a UEFA coaching qualification to understand. That is an upgrade. The detail on data is no longer just the homework done by managers and scouts. The voices you hear have done their prep too, very detailed. Top Premier League bosses watch like the rest of us, recognising that they could learn some information which might create a marginal gain in their own next fixture. As for the football itself, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes. Actually, I want to jump in on that, the way the pundits sum up the game, because I do think when they rush through at half-time and full-time, they're just looking for something, anything that will inform. And then when you get something like the Monday Night Live, and they've had a chance to really go back and isolate the issues, that it is much more informative at that stage. And I think sometimes some players cop it wrongly for mistakes made in the build-up to goals conceded when they're looking at it at half-time and full-time. And then when you get it and see it in its full range. I mean, you coach, you work with a manager in National League South. What all managers basically do is they'll run every goal conceded and every goal scored back at least a minute.
And we do have access to that material, believe it or not, in the
video.
6th tier.
Yeah. And then you run through and see how the breakdown happens. And I do that, but just with my team in order to see how the breakdown happens. And it's quite interesting who's top of what I call the anti-assists at any stage in the season. But I'm not going to reveal that.
But I do think the level has improved so much. I mean, I co-commentate now with a whole range of different people, and they're all
excellent,
very, very good. And there is a queue forming because players realise it is one of the next best things, I think. I mean, I've been lucky enough to coach as well as commentate and be a fan. And I think that the nearest thing to recreating the playing experience for the top players, obviously, is to be a co-commentator. And you get some who will say that. Others like to be in the studio. You get a better profile, maybe suits certain temperaments. I've been trying for years to persuade Jamie Redknapp to do some co-commentary because I think he'd be really good. But he's tough on himself, I think. But he's obviously very enlightening in the studio, and it's his choice, and he's lucky enough to have that choice. So the way the game is spoken about, I think there's so much more conversation about it. And yeah, if you say, oh, he's got to get first contact from that corner, people know that, and people are going, no wonder we're letting goals from corners, we don't get the first contact. They're fans saying that. And I think the general level of education has come through the television.
Don't let the ball bounce.
Yeah, anything. Or there's the way we live in the football world. Of course, we all know people who don't actually live in the football world and who look at us as very strange people because we're so obsessed by it. But I think there's a huge interest. It's such a simple game. It's such a wonderful game, and the complexities come from the analysing the action when it's happened, but when so much of it is instinctive on the pitch. And did he line up that shot and bang it into the top corner? It's great aim, put it in there. He's just had a whack at it and it's flown into sometimes it's as simple as that. And I think we try and reflect that as well as broadcasters. But no, I think football is the most watchable it's ever been. And when I started watching it in the 50s, the scores were as extravagant as they are now. And so it's not always about goals, but there was no profile, there was no recognition of the marketing of the game. And it's all joined together. Of course, it's not perfect, but the actual what you watch on the field is as good as I can ever remember it being. And I want to hang around for a few more years to keep watching it because it's wonderful.
And I have to tell everyone how sad Martin is. with his addiction to football, that he did reveal to me not long ago that when he finally hangs up his vocal cords, he'd love to follow Woking home and away.
Yeah, that's what I've always said. That's my default position, really. And yeah, I have to learn how to get tickets for the away games. But that hopefully that's still in the future. But if it comes along, I'll be very happy with it.
Right, let's go back to the best time of our lives and do 3 more teams. Best time of our lives. The most entertaining era of Arsenal. 1-0 to the... there haven't been... Well, I mean, when Charlie George and George Graham were creating patterns for the double winning team, with Radford and Kennedy up front and Geordie Armstrong on the left wing. I mean, that obviously was an entertaining side. But nothing prepared anybody for the Arsene Wenger era. And I still look back to the first time they won the league under Wenger, 98, and that final game where Tony Adams, who had spent a career launching it, started playing football and broke through to score the most incredible goal.
But the pass from Steve Bold, who spent most of his career stopping the opposition. And I think, what did I say? That sums it all up for the Wenger era.
Yeah, and then, of course...
That was the first season of Wenger.
Yeah, and then, of course, Henri Bergkamp. And I still think one of the most underrated players of that era, Robert Pires, who I saw play for Marseille in the Champions League in 99-2000 in the number 10 role in a 3-4-1-2 and tear Chelsea apart. I've never forgiven him. I just say Pires, diver, spitter. Nah. He was an absolutely gorgeous footballer, right up there for me with Henri and Bergkamp.
For me, it has to be the Invincibles. I can't pick out any particular game. One that, of course, had the Manchester United penalty being converted and the 0-0 at Old Trafford, which ended in chaos, then there would be no Invincibles. I think that was game 7 of the season, something like that, very early on anyway. But to go through any league unbeaten is an extraordinary achievement. And for Arsenal to do that, it probably was a bit more of a pragmatic approach than some of the other seasons you're referring to. But just absolutely astonishing. Each year, you talked earlier about the great teams, the Manchester City team, some great Manchester United teams and Liverpool teams who start with wonderful runs, and you think, could it happen again? I think Man United got to a February and they lost at Wolves when it started to look as though it might happen. But it's such an amazing competition, the top level of English football. To put together a 5-game unbeaten run is quite an achievement. So to do it for the whole 38-game season, astonishing. I think I've said it before that Leicester winning the league and Alan Shearer's 260 goals are the 3 things that stand out for me over the 30-plus years of the Premier League, and the power to add, of course.
And just an interesting insight on that as well. Ashley Cole recently chose his best 11 out of Arsenal and Chelsea that he played with. And he put Freddie Ljungberg in there on the right wing and spoke in huge praise about the role that Ljungberg played in that team in a way that I've never heard anybody else do before. And he was another one who never, because of the Henri Bergkamp genius, never
I had
quite
the
got
honour
the praise.
recently, Neil, just before Christmas, I think the honour of being on Freddie Ljungberg's show on Viaplay, which is one of the broadcasters across the Scandinavian countries and 2 other countries as well in more Eastern Europe. And so I was interviewed by Freddie, which was great fun. But obviously I tried to get my own back by drawing stuff out of him and his sense of being a competitor when he was a player. And we know professional players want to win, but there are various shades of that. He'd be at if you like, the darkest or the lightest shade, whichever end of the spectrum you think is appropriate. Terrific player. And he always scored in the big games as well. So top player.
Chelsea
bloke as well.
Chelsea, of course, you can go back to your contemporary, John Motson, became a Chelsea season ticket holder as a young man, as a boy. just to watch Jimmy Greaves. And in his 4 years at Chelsea, from age 17 to 21, he got 132 goals. I mean, just extraordinary player. But the Osgood, Hudson, Charlie Cook era, Peter Bonetti, my hero of the 60s, 70s, is one that always stands out. But I'm not even going to go for the Abramovich, Mourinho era and all the trophies, or the Ancelotti and I'm going to go to before that, and Ruud Gullit taking over from Glenn Hoddle, and sexy football with a midfield of Dan Petrescu, Dennis Wise, Roberto Di Matteo, Gustavo Poyet, with Gianfranco Zola and whoever, Mark Hughes or Torre Andre Flo, or for a while Ruud Gullit himself in midfield. I mean, that was my sublime period. And the only other one I just want to mention with Chelsea is after we won the Champions League in 2012, my attitude changed. I'd seen us win everything, and I wanted to be entertained more than I wanted to see us win things. And of course, that summer we signed the world's greatest entertainer, Eden Hazard, who I always called the best playground player in the world, and which he has now really proved that that's exactly what he was, because he didn't do anything except go out and play in the playground.
If we continue with this podcast, it is my ambition to have Eden Hazard on it, because...
Well, I have a few beers.
Well,
he and I were.
He I might even have one with Ed if I get the chance to talk. I loved he's a real family man, and I live near the Chelsea training ground, and if you went down after lunch, maybe to a press conference, you might think you might bump into, he'd have his lunch, he'd do all the right things, and then he'd go home to his family. And he was as happy playing in the garden with his kids as he was playing in a football field and manipulating the ball, as you say, in that joyful, youthful way. But my favourite story about him involves Gary Neville and Chelsea winning the league, and Sky take the presentation onto the pitch, of course, and then they've got David Jones, I guess it was, who was hosting this post-match love-in for the champions. And Thibaut Courtois was being interviewed, and Eden appeared on the scene with the Golden Glove, which Thibaut had won, but needed on that last game, what was happening elsewhere, but it had fallen Thibaut's way. And so Eden comes out, he's done a massive favour to Sky, he's come in, and of course the two Belgians, they're speaking English for us, and then Gary, and I love Gary Neville to bits, as that we've mentioned in this podcast before. He's an amazing person, a force of nature, but he has a capacity for the serious moment when it's a lighter touch, maybe. And he turns to Eden and goes, and I'm thinking, how lovely of Eden to do this. What a bloke, such a good footballer. And he goes to Eden, when I watch you play, Eden, I always think he could give a bit more. He's just won the league. It's a fair,
and the player of the year, and the footballer of the year.
It's a fair question because of the sort of dilettante side of Eden. But not the timing. The question was right. The timing was totally wrong. And I'm just watching on a monitor in the tunnel at Chelsea, I think. I go, no. And Eden, apart from, I knew he had the capacity to bite back a little bit, but he did it in the most charming way. He goes, Gary goes, if I do that, what am I going to do the next season? And the question was not framed in that jokey way, but he took the sting out of it. And I've never discussed that moment with him, but I'd love to have the opportunity to do that. And I'd like to share that with you all if we can get from. To be honest with you, I think we can say this now. We have tried, haven't we? We have tried. Yeah. And I know he's been on one or two other podcasts because, as you all know, everybody has a podcast now. I think it's mandatory for people over the age of 25 to have their own podcast, certainly if they're involved in football.
My very, very quick Eden story, which I know he won't mind me telling now. I did a little sound interview with him for Sirius XM Radio, and about the Super Bowl, because I know he loves his American NFL. And I said, how will you be watching it? And he said, well, I won't watch it live because it's overnight bad hours for a footballer. Got to be professional. And he said, so I will turn off all media. I will not talk about it to anybody at training the next day. And then I will go home, and my wife and I, we will sit on the sofa together, and we will watch it as live in the front room. And I said, and what will your refreshment be? And he goes, very professional, a jug of water. And I just ended it there. It was just a little clip that I wanted, and I ended it there. And as I turned the microphone off, he tapped it to make sure it was off and said, and a big bowl of popcorn.
Yeah,
So,
a very normal person with an extremely abnormal
a Chelsea
talent.
game?
Well, I was sitting behind you, so it was the Champions League final, and I watched Neil in full cry as a fan reporter, with fan, but very much a reporter first. And yeah, it was amazing. That was It's Written in the Stars season, wasn't it? And to do it in Munich as an away game, and with team issues and not the strongest side available, extraordinary. And it was 6 days after Sergio Aguero had won the league for Manchester City. It was quite a good week that for us on Sky. So
when the
for me,
final
special.
penalty in the shootout was being taken, there were three of us working within Chelsea who were Chelsea supporters. There weren't an awful lot. We went arm in arm in front of you, like the players were, for our moment of reflected glory. And I was incredibly confident once I realised it was Drogba and not Torres taking the final penalty. And when it went in, I remember we were in the front row, in fact, of the press box, and you were in the second row. And I remember careering up the stairs to the top in celebration, and then coming running down, and you were still commentating. And as I came running down, you were standing there with your arms open, and I jumped into your arms while you were commentating. And then when I came away and turned around, Gary Neville shook my hand.
There you go.
He shook my hand. That was the best I got out of
It
your
was better than a hug from me, that's for sure. But it was a great achievement, and at the time I said it's the greatest night in Chelsea's football history. And they've obviously had a lot of successes since then, but for me that was the first London club as well.
And still the only one, and won it twice.
Yes.
Yeah. Eat your heart out, Arsenal. Right, okay. We're going to do some skipping here because we've been taking a lot of time. We're going to do one more team, and then we're going to three of the best. We've got other teams that we want to do. We'll do them on another podcast to keep you all happy. The other team we're going to do now is Tottenham Hotspur. And Tottenham, who probably have more entertaining teams, I would imagine, than almost any other side, and less successful ones. Spursy! But of course, I came in on the double team of 1961, Bobby Smith, John White. John White was their midfield maestro, and at the age of something like 27 got killed on a golf course by a lightning strike, standing under a tree. I mean, just tragic and extraordinary, but a wonderful footballer. And then Danny Blanchler and Dave Mackay. I mean, what a team that was. And then they bought Jimmy Greaves the following season, and through the 60s just scored goals.
You haven't mentioned one of the players who lost his place in the team because there were no substitutes then. Les Allen, the father of Clive Allen, of course.
Bradley Allen,
and Bradley as well. Clive wrote his big chapter into Spurs history, 49 goals in the 86-87 season, which had Coventry stopping them winning the cup, and Coventry for the first time since then on the Wembley Trail in the competition.
So, and in the 70s, they still had a good team, and Martin Chivers leading the line, but the 80s team with Hoddle and Ardiles and Chris Waddle, and then of course that was followed by Gascoigne and Lineker, Klinsmann after that. I mean, they right through the 20th century, they were amongst the great entertainers. I'm not sure they've been quite the same since, but you'd have to throw in the Harry Redknapp team with Modric and Bale and Peter Crouch. and Robbie Keane. And you'd have to throw in the Poch team, the Pochettino team, with Dele Alli and Harry Kane and Christian Eriksen and Kyle Walker and Danny Rose at full. I mean, there is a Tottenham way. I will admit there is a Tottenham way that is very entertaining.
Well, they have the best stadium in the world at the moment, and trying to find a team to match up to that is never going to be easy. They've always been, I mean, they won the league in 1951 and 1961, and not since 1961, but they've always been a cup team. And there was a period where they'd won all their FA Cup finals, I think, and then they lost to Coventry, didn't they, in 1987. It's hard to pick a game because that kind of cup football, you'd have to be there on the day when, I mean, the Ricky Villa goal, I think, is probably that I didn't commentate on it, but I could have done, in the sense that I was the sub, not used, back in the studio at Thames Television for the replay that night, just in case the line went down. They had a sub, and I was always happy to do that because you might get on. I did get on a couple of times in other games, but the Ricky Villa, who came up with one of the best lines ever when the Falklands War was about to happen around that time. They said, the journalist said to him, "What will you do, Ricky, if our countries are at war?" And he went, "I'll go back home and I'll defend my village." And the journalist looked him in the eye and said, "Could you tell me the name of the village?" And he went, "Broxbourne," which is where he was living in England. And it was a wonderful tongue-in-cheek remark, typical of the man, really. And that took some of the heat out. It was difficult for us as broadcasters. I remember doing the 82 World Cup. I was working for ITV, and we were supposed to do the opening game, which involved Argentina against Belgium, I think, live. And the politicians and television pulled the plug on it so you can cover the game, but just show, in fact, Belgium won. But when Argentina arrived at the hotel, we were sort of waiting there to do our journalistic work, and Ozzy was sitting in the front of the bus, and I caught his eye through the glass at the front of the coach, and he gave me a thumbs up like that, which was quite a reassuring thing. It was pretty serious stuff at the time. And
Ozzy Ardila is one of those footballers who was a chain smoker. Mm. So many of them back in the day, and
especially outside of, I mean, obviously plenty of, we're not going to name and shame, but plenty of British players chain smoked as well. But a lot of them, it was a sort of seen as a continental thing, a bit like diving.
Yeah.
But it wasn't exclusive to other nations, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Neither.
So I've got to pick a Tottenham. One Tottenham. I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go Hoddle, Ardiles, Waddle, Clive Allen. That was some era that I'll go with that, and Chelsea always beat them. So yeah,
I did a Q&A with Glenn Hoddle at my football club Woking a couple of weeks ago, and we sort of kept him outside, so I had to do the intro, and I started by saying, well, Chris Waddle's singing partner on Diamond Lights. And then the more recent appearances, the grandfather clock in The Masked Singer. And by the way, perhaps the most creative football brain that there's been in the last 40 or 50 years, Glenn Hoddle. He was lovely. He's a great talker, and it was a special evening.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to this in a future podcast with more clubs, but we're going to move on now to our normal closure. 3 of the best. And they made it pay. Blah, 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 blah. Right. Martin, 3 of the best. Your young player.
Well, I try to come to sit in your kitchen here. That's the exclusive for you. That's where we are, in a part of Surrey. That's as far as we'll tell you.
Between Stamford Bridge and Cobham.
Yes, absolutely right. Mid-ground. With some relevance from my particular work. And I did the first leg of the quarter-final of the Champions League between Paris, as they like to be called, PSG, and Barcelona, and really taken by Barcelona's production line. We know all about La Masia and how Messi and a million others have come through, many of them to the top level. Pau Kubasi became the youngest defender in Champions League history to start a quarter-final. away in the Parc des Princes, a big daunting task, and did pretty well. And Lamine Yamal, who's already played, I think they're both full internationals. Certainly Yamal has played, I think, half a dozen times and scored, the youngest scorer. He's still 16. Kabasi's 17 in a few days. So extraordinary, really, when you're looking, in the team, the senior players like Ilkay Gundogan, who's held up the trophy, the last man to do it, actually, for Manchester City. And the mix that Barcelona are not in the best place financially. I think everybody knows that. The ground's being redeveloped. It's not an easy time. And one way, of course, to solve these problems, and you can't pay big transfer fees and maybe not even big wages, is to promote from within. And these two kids did really, really well. The second leg's still to come, and they're probably playing that as well. Lamine Yamal was involved in the first goal, which he played it in towards Lewandowski, who's twice his age, and then Rafinha comes and finishes it off. And so it's not quite an assist, but it was very much a focal part of that first goal of another thrilling quarter-final of Champions League, delivering absolutely in abundance. But for me, those two, keep an eye on them, but there are others to follow. Pedri came on as sub, played the pass of the night. He's almost a veteran now, of course.
He's still only 21.
Yeah, and he played the pass for Rafinha's second goal, and within 2 minutes of coming into the game. So it was special. It's not decisive, and of course they're trailing Real Madrid in La Liga, but I would say very promising and very much in Barcelona's traditions.
Well, I'm going on a theme this week, which is with creative players. And I'm starting as my young player. I'm staying with my club, Chelsea, and going with Cole Palmer. But the reason I'm going with him, obviously another one out of the Manchester City Pep camp. But the thing that intrigues me about him is he's not fast. He's not strong. He has this ability to watch the game and find space, and a lot of the time he seems to walk in the Messi way. Now, my player,
he's a better penalty taker than Messi, by the way.
My player this week is someone who has become the best walking player in the world for me. But Cole Palmer understands finding space. The intriguing thing I'm going to, while praising him, and he's clearly Chelsea's best player this season, he's got himself into the England squad. While praising him, I'm also going to ask questions of him, because the great thing about somebody in their first year of senior football is that they show everybody their qualities, but the people they show their qualities to are the most football intelligent defenders in the world. And those defenders will work out what to do against him next season. And next season is going to be very, very significant as to whether he continues to shine as brightly as he shone in this first season, because they will understand that he's very one-footed. They will understand that when he stops, the whole game stops, and it doesn't have to. But he's got that magic that makes everybody else stop because they're frightened of what he will do. And Messi has been the absolute king of that, of stop. Pele was the king of that in his era, stopping. But he can stop the game, Palmer. And sometimes I just think, oh, God, I hope somebody doesn't put their foot through him when he stops it. So next season's going to be very significant in the development of his career. But at the moment, he looks for space and he finds it. Beautiful.
Let's hope that this coal burns for a long time.
Hey, brother, commentator. Old player.
Well, I've lost a friend, Joe Kinnear.
I love Joe.
Cheeky chappy, wonderful player in a very good Tottenham team. We've talked about Tottenham's strengths, the cup teams. He won the FA Cup, a couple of League Cups, I believe, and the UEFA Cup. And still looking like the ball boy, really, when he was an international with the Republic of Ireland. A great person off the pitch in terms of one-liners and the banter that perhaps is less acceptable these days, but was certainly part of the dressing room culture for many, many years. And I got to know him best of all because we had a commentators team from the early 1970s right till the start of the Premier League. In 1992, we played on Sundays. And Joe, actually, in between jobs in football, worked in television as one of the men on the touchline that signals for the kickoff to be okay, getting the match director in his ear and passing on who's going to be the substitute. And this is an international footballer who's won major trophies, happy to do it, to be involved in the game. So we got to know him really well. And then he came, of course, he mostly known as a right back, but he came and played up front and enjoyed himself on Sunday afternoons. And he did me one enormous favour. I played for Corinthian Casuals, which is the epitome of sporting behaviour, and I tried to be in that edict, and I never got booked or sent off in a proper game. But I did get sent off in a commentator's game. But Joe, it never happened, because Joe went up to the referee and in his lively, cheeky way said, "Now, come on, ref, this is just a fun game. You know, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And he let me stay on. So I have an unblemished record in the disciplinary department, thanks to the wonderful Joe Kinnear. Joe, rest in peace. You're a wonderful guy. You were wonderful company.
Yeah, I got to know him when he was at Wimbledon, when he was their reserve team coach. And he took over as manager after that. And I was doing their Wimbledon club call in the early days of that in the 80s. And I used to speak to him on the phone regularly, as well as down at the training ground. And I left Wimbledon to work with only Chelsea. And it was 93-94, Glenn Hoddle's first season. And Wimbledon brought a reserve team, as it was in those days, down to Kingstonian locally to play a reserve game. And they won 1-0. And I was hanging around the tunnel afterwards to do some post-match interviews, and Joe walks out and he goes, hey, he says, "I love the way your team plays. I love it. Pass, 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 pass. Oh, I'm 3 yards outside my own penalty area." And
he was a pragmatic football man, that's for sure.
Brilliant. He was so funny. He was so. And when he did his arriving at Newcastle press conference and used the F word about 27 times in the first 3 minutes, and of course his name was Joe Kinnear. Up at Newcastle, he became known as JFK after that, and it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Loved him. My old player is still playing. And it's Luka Modric, continuing my theme, who came on for Real Madrid against Manchester City when they were 2-3 down, set up the winning goal. I look back, I think Luka Modric is... We talk about Ronaldo and Messi, of course, dominating the game, but I don't think Ronaldo would have been the footballer he was without Modric. At Real Madrid. And the creative players, you know, football is a game of 2 penalty areas, and almost everything that happens in between in a way isn't as important. But the Modrics of this world are just so crucial to the successful teams. And I go back to 2010 and Tottenham under Harry Redknapp were doing okay, but no more, being pretty Spursy. And the top managers, and Harry was a top manager, they'll play with things until they find the right way. Fergie was like that. You play with something until you found the right way. And he had 2 problems, Redknapp. They'd signed this young Welsh left back from Southampton, who didn't play regularly, and for a year didn't play in a Spurs team that won a game, called Gareth Bale. And they'd signed Luka Modric, this creative, constructive midfielder from Dinamo Zagreb, but he was tiny, and he'd be a pushover in the maelstrom of the Premier League. And so he was playing on the left wing in a 4-4-2, and Bale wasn't getting the game. And they played Arsenal towards the end of the season. And Harry had run out of central midfielders, either through injury or suspension, and had no one to play in central midfield. So against his better judgment, he put Modric in centre midfield. So he had to find someone to play on the left wing. And he'd run out of people there too. So he put the young Gareth Bale on the left wing. And they tore Arsenal apart. They tore them apart. I think they went 2-0 up and finally won 2-1. I can't remember. But they tore them apart. And 2 weeks later, Chelsea were on a roll and going on to win the league and cup double under Ancelotti, ahead of Manchester United. The only game that Chelsea lost on the run-in was at White Hart Lane with Modric running midfield and Bale cavorting up and down the left wing. And that was some team, and Modric was some player. And even then, when he went to Real Madrid in, was it 2013, I think it was, in his first season at Real Madrid, it took him time to adapt, and he was voted their worst signing ever by the Madrid faithful. And now here he is. And this is the modern player. I still think that Messi at the age of, would he be 41 at the next World Cup, 40 at the World Cup? I think I wouldn't be surprised if he is at the World Cup as a substitute, coming on for 15 minutes to change a game. And I wouldn't be surprised if Modric is either.
I think he said that's his ambition, hasn't he,
Yeah.
Luca?
And he has just been, for years, the best midfielder in the world. A credit to his country and a credit to every club he's played for.
Tim Sherwood, who had him as Tottenham manager, said, by the way, he's the best defensive midfield player in the world because he defended by getting the ball, but keeping the ball. And so he was able to build bridges like that. And you don't think of Modric as a defensive player, but Tim said if you could clone Modric, that would give you what you need at the top level of football now. So brilliant and blessed with a body that obviously carries no weight at all. So he can go on forever, really.
I was sitting in the crowd at the Bernabeu for the Real Madrid-Chelsea Champions League game when Chelsea had lost at home and were winning away and were winning the tie away, and he created the goal that brought the tie back level. And I was sitting there with my son, and as the whole Real Madrid Bernabeu exploded, and we were there head in hands in grief, and my son turned around to me and said, "Oh God, that was the greatest pass I've ever seen in my life."
To Rodrigo.
It was for Rodrigo.
Yeah, I commentate on the game. I agree with your son. It was a fantastic pass. I'm going to go again from my experience over the last few days for David Brooks, who's on loan at Southampton from Bournemouth, but has had the most horrendous time through cancer-related illness that threatened not just his football career, but obviously his entire existence. It takes a special kind of person to cope with that and just try and live as normal life as possible, to come back from it, to play regularly for a championship team that's doing well. I mean, he's with a Premier League club because obviously Bournemouth are still in the Premier League, but he wasn't getting regular games, and having missed 2 years of his career, I was going to use him as the young player. He's 26, but he's missed 2 years, so in football terms, he's 24. But so amazed that, and so happy for him to come back. And he played and scored for Wales in the semi-final of the playoffs, so he's back with his country, although he is English, and I think he's one of those who's escaped the English net. But I watched him play very closely, and it wasn't the best game that he's played, but his use of the ball, he's a left footer playing on the right, as so many players are these days, and he also works very hard for the team. And although one or two of his passes should have led to perhaps goals, certainly created chances, but it was a stop-start sort of game, a tough game against Coventry, who had their own agenda in the Championship, as well as trying to prepare for a Wembley FA Cup semi-final. But the one thing that was notable, he got taken off halfway through the second half, but very soon after he's taken off, the player who was marking him and he was tracking back with, the left back for Coventry, Jake Bidwell, suddenly cropped up totally unmarked in the Southampton penalty area and scored and got Coventry back into the game. They didn't win it, but it finished 2-1. But the absence of Brooks was felt very keenly at that moment, and the player that had been shifted to the right-hand side Russell Martin, the Southampton manager, within a couple of minutes of that goal, he took him off. So he'd recognised that he's a big fan of David Brooks. He said, if David Brooks would sign for me, Russell Martin, for the rest of his career, I'd do the deal now. But I just think it's a human story. I wish him every success in the world. He's an example to other players. He's not the only player in my time of following the game who's been stricken with life-threatening illnesses and come back to do the job. But good luck, David, and you deserve every success that I hope you're going to have in the future.
Yeah, great story. He had a year of injury as well before he signed for Bournemouth, and Eddie Howe, I remember saying he wouldn't have got him if he hadn't had that year of injury because he's so good, and he is. He was a wonderful player before the illness, and I'm sure he will be again. Sebastian Haller scored Borussia Dortmund's goal like that. Atletico Madrid, and he had 2 bouts. People forget of testicular cancer because it came back after the first.
Well done the doctors as well.
Well, my player coming on, continuing my theme of creative players, is Kevin De Bruyne, who
Don't you do him every week?
well, I haven't done him yet, but it's just. I said last week that I thought Mbappe was the best player in the world and Vinicius the second best player, but I'd have to throw in there De Bruyne as well. I think he's that good at that level. I think he is one of the best players in the world. I think for the last 6-7 years he's been with Modric, the best midfielder in the world. And he's had a lot of injuries recently. He's not as young anymore. Is he 32 now, I think, or 33 coming up to? But I've watched him play a few times at the games this season, including one of the Foden hat tricks, and even that game, I thought he was the best player on the pitch, not Phil. But what he's done coming back, he's become this walking footballer that Messi became, and it's like he watches the game and he looks for where the space is, then he lopes into the space, and then they're looking for him, knowing that he's going to find the space, and they pass the ball to him, and it's explosion. And he's become, amongst other things, the best crosser in the world. He crosses an awful lot now with Haaland in the team, and it is just he is. You said it a little earlier that he's at a level higher than everybody else. I saw an interview with him, gloriously arrogant moment in which the interviewer said to him, "What do you think is your best asset?" And he looked at him and he said, "Well, I like to think it's my brain." and that is it. He is the most intelligent midfielder in the world with Modric, and it's just it is. People say having got the best players in the world because Mbappe's not here and Messi was never here and Vinicius. Yeah, we got De Bruyne here and Salah as well, and best players in the world are here.
Yeah, I just wonder whether the Salah is in his swan song, because I've been trying to think of reasons other than the obvious why Jurgen Klopp would turn his back on the club that he loves. And if he knows that Mo Salah might be coming to the end, and there's been rumours clearly about that, but he will be a great loss, and Kevin will when he moves on. And I always think, I've just mentioned now David Brooks' English, Kevin De Bruyne's mum had, I think, a British passport, so I don't know whether that would have qualified him to. But to say he'd struggle to get in now would be a bit unfair. He wouldn't struggle to get in, would he? So a super player, and of course a Chelsea connection. Cole Palmer. So did Modric play for Chelsea? No, he didn't. No. He didn't. So
we tried. Tottenham wanted 40 million, and we wouldn't pay it in 2012. Roman, what did you do? Right. That has been the Joy of Football podcast number 3. We'll come back to some of these best time of our lives with other clubs, quite possibly in number 4, but we haven't discussed that yet. From Martin and me.
The best time of my life is now. Thank you, Neil.
Ta-ra. Thanks for listening, watching, however you managed it. Once again, the email address for anyone wanting to contact us, the joys of football podcast @gmail.com. And of course, if you put in your search engine The Joy of Football. You'll find us everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. Which, considering how old we are, is extraordinary.